Candidates, and if you would, just raise your hand, let everybody know who you are. We'll start in order. We did draw straws, as Tyler said. Bill Mosley, down in the end. Welcome, Bill. Sally Russell gets to go second today. Joshua Longley. Brian Douglas, in the middle. And to my immediate left is Mr. Michael Hughes. Okay, one more housekeeping note. Please take out your cell phones and turn them off, if you wouldn't mind, or put them on mute. And that will save us some embarrassing headaches later on. Okay, we did the coin toss, so we're going to begin with Bill today. What we're going to do is 2 minutes for opening statements. Let's get it on here. Okay, all right, we're going to start with Mr. Mosley. You have 2 minutes to tell us about yourself, sir.
Okay, when I first moved to Bend, you often saw friends downtown. Businesses in our community would help and provide advice to one another, advice that actually enabled my business to grow from 2 to 60 employees. And my family and my coworkers could actually afford a home with a little bit of grass for the kids to play in. Many people in our community would help those through nonprofits. The drivers were actually courteous and they weren't too rushed. Neighborhoods were quiet and safe, and you could always find solitude in our forests. Day by day, we're losing all of these things that we love about Bend. Home ownership is beyond the reach of our children. Traffic is jammed and dangerous. Downtown is crammed with tourists, and our forests are implementing capacity controls. Why? In one of the fastest growing cities in the United States, we react and bumble. Reed Market was at capacity the day we finished it. Who puts a roundabout next to a train crossing? For 20 years, city leaders knew that Southeast Bend residents would have to connect to sewer and did nothing. Now hundreds of seniors could actually be forced from their homes because they can't afford a $25,000 fee. Our city plays a game of social engineering trying to force people out of their cars. And I ask you, how's that working in Portland and Seattle? We have a housing crisis that did not arrive 2 years ago, and yet we failed for a decade to bring in a single inch of new housing land. This election is perhaps our last chance to save the Bend that we love. We need leadership. Hello? We need leadership that will listen, set goals, make a plan, and execute. Experience leading a business developed my skills. Skills that led the council to plan for bringing in land faster, adopt housing affordability goals, create a livability committee, reduce tourism advertising, improve downtown safety, secure record funding for street maintenance. Is there another microphone?
There's not.
Okay. Secure record funding for street maintenance and award contracts to connect.
Just speak right. You can just speak right into it there.
Okay. Improve downtown safety, secure record funding for street maintenance, and connect Empire Murphy Road. My leadership gets things done, and as mayor, I'll make homes more affordable by balancing supply and demand, fix our road maintenance and congestion issues, and preserve a friendly community where people know each other and help each other. I want to help protect the Bend that we love and achieve a future that we desire. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bill. Sorry about the microphone. Okay, Sally.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. And a special thanks to the Realtors, because is this happening to this?
Yes, it is.
Special thanks to the Realtors because, you know, as a Realtor, you are often the first person who really gets to know Bend and gets to lead the way. You are in this series, and so thank you for that role you play in our community. We have a really special place here, and one of the challenges we actually have with Bend, let me try to move this in a better place, is that we have created and we live in one of the most desired cities in the West Coast. we worked on that for a long time. And our challenge today is to keep what we have and do a better job going into the future of managing it. And so our question in front of us today is, what kind of leader do you need to take Bend forward into the future? I would suggest that you need someone who's strong, who's informed, who's positive, and experienced. And someone who has done a lot of work in bringing our city to where it is today. We are sitting here talking about how to take this town we love today and keep it for tomorrow, for our kids and our future. My priorities, and I'm sure we're going to talk about these, transportation in Bend, because we need to be sure that cars and goods move efficiently throughout our city. And we also know that other people will want to move through town on their feet and on their bicycles and on transit. And those may be economic reasons as well as choices. Workforce and affordable housing we'll talk about. I want to talk more about neighborhood hubs, neighborhood centers. And I want to talk about what we came here for. But most of all, I want you to know that I have a master's in business administration. I was the executive director of the Cascade Festival of Music. But I got to that job because my boss, as I was marketing director at Broken Top Limited Partnership, called me over to work for this organization. And I left to take care of my mother at the end of her life. I've been on the Planning Commission for 9 years. I want to thank Susan Prowl for being the staff person for the 9 years I was on the Planning Commission. Thank you very much. So I look forward to this debate, and I'm sure you'll learn a lot more about who the most qualified person is. Thank you.
Joshua Longley.
Thanks. It's nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here with these other fine candidates. I'll make sure to give you back that minute of time that we lost. They're both going over, because I'll keep this brief. You might find it unusual that someone who's not even been here in town for 2 years would put their hat in the ring to run for this position, and that's fine. And at the end of the day, you're welcome to hold that opinion. And I'm not here to change your mind on anything. And actually, I might not even be looking for your vote. But if you choose to give it to me, I will accept it. I'm a photographer and a photojournalist, and since I got here, have been interviewing people of this community, 105 people to date, mostly about our values, what we mean to each other as individuals, and how we function within the community, and what we can do about the number of issues plaguing us locally, nationally, and globally. And my quest is to figure out what our values are, what are your values, and how can we make those shine as Bend grows. I believe that the growth of Bend is inevitable, and I also view it as a positive thing. When I first arrived in Bend, I didn't see friends downtown because I didn't know anybody, but I did see a lot of friendly people, and I think that says a lot about where one lives. And as we debate today, I hope that you'll understand that my main focus is a social one, and how we can better get along. And I think as we better get along, many of our problems will just go away. Thank you.
Brian Douglas.
Good afternoon, and I'd like also to echo everybody's appreciation for all of you to host this on such a beautiful day. I just had a myth blown away from me this morning. I came in here. I thought that this was Bill Mosley's home turf, home field advantage here, and I'm shocked to learn that none of us as 6 candidates met the requirements to be endorsed by your organization. But anyway, so as that is, I came in 1990 and moved from Portland. I've been a neighborhood community activist. I've been a community organizer. I've been an entrepreneur where I created the Cascade Lakes Relay, and I've been a philanthropist, which I tried to prove to people that you don't have to have a lot of money to be a philanthropist. So sometimes the best way you can do that is to build a business model like the Boy Scout Christmas Tree Recycling Project, which has been on in this community for almost 30 years and has raised well over $1.25 million. We never know exactly how much it is. But anyway, those are the kinds of things that I came to Bend to be part of, and have been successfully doing that. I basically have a number of issues that I'm concentrating on. One, I'm concentrating on governance. I happen to believe that what we need to do is shrink our city council from 6 councilors to 4, including the mayor, who was elected, of course, at large. I think 73.4% of those who voted to elect our mayor directly in the May election, I don't think that they had in mind the idea to promote necessarily somebody from the council into the mayor's office. And so I think that what Ben is looking for is a fresh look, fresh perspectives, good ideas, and a vision for the next 25 to maybe 50 years. The second thing I'm interested in is building the infrastructure that we have not built and kept up with over the last 20 to 30 years. And what I'm speaking to are things like 7 miles of unpaved city streets. I'm talking about 300 miles of non-existent sidewalk, 5,000 plus in terms of curb ramps and in traffic calming. Is that my buzzer stop?
No.
Okay, I'll just leave it at that because I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk some more. Michael.
Thank you very much, Ron.
Good afternoon, my name is Michael Hughes. I'm an attorney and a hemp farmer. I went to school at the University of Nebraska. I graduated there in 1995 with a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice. I grew up on a farm in Nebraska. I then attended Drake University Law School where I studied agricultural law, criminal law, and litigation. I started my career as a public defender, a full-time public defender in Minnesota, in Moorhead, Minnesota, the Fargo-Moorhead area. And then after 7 years of public service, which I thought was really important as a lawyer to provide public service, I then went into private practice where I did civil litigation. And I did that in Bemidji, Minnesota. And much like many of the founding people of this town, I came from northern Minnesota, spent time in the woods in northern Minnesota, and there's a lot of similarities in this town and northern Minnesota, just there's no big beautiful mountains in northern Minnesota. And I have lived in many different towns. We moved to Redding, California shortly before we moved up to Bend. And when we moved to Bend, we realized after living in many different places and having spent time in many different places that Bend was very unique. And one of the things that made Bend very unique was the way it had developed over the years. The first time I came through Bend was in 1990, and there wasn't a whole lot here that I remember in 1990. And then when we came back in 2011, it was amazing what the town had become. And it had become that through hard work and leadership that the town had exhibited. And is it perfect? No place is perfect, but I can guarantee you that if you comb the United States as I have, you will be hard-pressed to find another community like Bend. You will be hard-pressed to find the scenic beauty that Bend has. You will be hard-pressed to find the community and the different people that live in Bend. It's a very eclectic community, has people with different and diverse opinions, and that's why I'm running for mayor, because I can listen to all sorts of opinions, analyze different opinions, and take them into account. I think that's what the mayor needs to do, and to be able to do is to listen to everybody from the community and come to a consensus about where we need to go forward. Thank you.
Okay, time to begin with the questions. You'll have 2 minutes to respond, and we'll go through all the candidates, and then we'll have that golden minute of rebuttal at the end of when everyone has spoken. So you might want to take notes if you disagree with a point or two to make sure that you get that in that minute. All right, first question, and Bill Mosley, I'm asking you. The city of Bend is now in the implementation phase of its UGB expansion. With continual growth projected for Bend, this is obviously not the last time Bend will be talking about the UGB. What steps should the city be taking now to plan for further growth? And as mayor, how would you lead on these efforts?
Yeah, the growth can actually be good for Bend, and I support the implementation of the current UGB. There's some aspects of it which not everyone agrees with. There's some of it which are really strong for our community, but it is the UGB that we have, and we have a scarcity of land within our community, scarcity of housing that's driving housing prices ever higher. I actually have a daughter who is 21 who has to live with several roommates because as a barista, it's hard to find a place to live. Half of my employees now actually live in Lopine or Redmond, so I have a 60-person software company. Half of them have to live outside the area because they cannot afford to live in our community longer. It's critical that we balance supply and demand. And so as far as managing our growth, we need to bend the demand curve down. That doesn't mean shrink, it just means grow a little bit slower than we are right now. We can do that by controlling our advertising for tourism in particular. And we need to increase the supply of housing, and that means bringing new housing on board. We're going to have to take advantage of the land that exists by building infrastructure to it, whether that's roads and sewers, and I've been a big proponent of that, of both Murphy and Empire. It's just critical that we build out those corridors to be able to bring that land supply on. If we don't bring the land supply on, Bend is going to continue to become a more and more expensive community, and there won't be a place for our kids to live anymore. I had someone write to me once and say, well, when you sell your house, you'll really like all the appreciation. And I said back to them, I said, well, you know, maybe the housing appreciation will warm your cold heart while your kids live 1,000 miles away. I just don't think that's the Bend of the future for us. I think we need a diverse community where people of all different kinds of jobs, whether they be teachers or software programmers or baristas, have a place to live.
Very good, thank you, sir. Sally?
Shall I try this again? So I think we all agree Bend is growing at a breakneck speed. And as we just had our urban growth boundary approved, we know that one of the things we need to do is actually use the land that we have then added to our urban growth boundary, as well as fill in our opportunity areas throughout Bend. I believe in the next 5 years we should be looking at creating urban area reserves. At the same time, we need to be really clear that it's expensive now, very expensive, to build our sewer infrastructure and our transportation infrastructure, as well as our water. And so what I believe we need to focus on is building our neighborhood centers and our opportunity area and our expansion areas, and be sure that we get the infrastructure that we need, whether or not it's streets or sewer or water, to those areas first, and focus the planning for that. So for instance, we all approved on council the planning for the southeast area, and it's actually, I think it was 27 homeowners, landowners. It was a lot of people to work with and people to wrangle, and so we had a huge public engagement piece and funding for that, which is very important, because this area is very important to Southeast Bend, because it will not only add homes, it will add businesses, it will add stores and a retail area. It will provide a neighborhood hub that the southeast area of Bend is looking for and needs. And these are the types of projects that we need to be doing all over Bend. We need these neighborhood centers, we need these neighborhood hubs, and we need to build the infrastructure around them, whether or not it's roads, or whether or not it's paths to the parks, or whether or not it's the sewer, which is we're experiencing in other areas of Bend is exceedingly expensive. So again, these are the types of planning that we can do inside our city, and with limited funds, let's be sure we use it effectively and build those homes that we do need.
All right, thank you, Sally. Joshua Longley.
Would you repeat the question?
Yes. The city of Bend is now in the implementation phase of its UGB expansion. With continual growth projected for Bend, this is obviously not the last time Bend will be talking about the UGB. What steps should the city be taking now to plan for further growth? And as mayor, how would you lead on these efforts?
Thanks. Build homes. I see a lot of vacant lots all over town. I live the last affordable house in Bend, I think. I live with my girlfriend in a tiny mill house in Old Bend. It's 650 square feet. It's mostly in disrepair, but that works for us because the price is right, the landlord doesn't care, so we can plant flowers and paint the front door and hang the lights on the porch, and I can walk most places in town, and that all feels very nice. Previously, we had lived in one of these newer developments that people seem to be very proud of around here, in a modern luxury apartment that I moved into with my girlfriend. She had already lived there, and it was pretty shoddily constructed. It was across 3rd. You couldn't walk to the grocery store. There wasn't a restaurant walking distance. There's all these issues, and that seems to be the focus. The developers seem to want to build strange living situations that don't really meet the need. So I would say, what is the need? Well, it seems to me, people of my age, I'm 36 and younger, We're not looking for 2,500 square foot homes with a huge yard that we have to water incessantly because grass doesn't grow here naturally, and on and on and on. We need places to live. We need places to live that allow us a life, to go to the movies and go out for dinner and buy some better quality groceries and maybe go on a vacation every once in a while. So I would say build apartments and build triplexes and multifamily housing, and I would say we could be very creative about that. I don't think these things have to exist in one way. When we say these words, we all, each one of us has a picture that pops into our brain, but it doesn't necessarily have to look like that. And there's a lot of brilliant people in this community. I think we can pull on those resources as a council and the mayor. I think we can make those voices much more amplified and use them to build the community that everybody wants.
All right, thank you, Joshua. Mr. Brian Douglas.
Growth in Bend is, as we all know, is really inevitable. We've seen it for the last 25, 30 years. And when I look at the UGB today, and I'm sure this is not going to be a really popular position, but I really look at the UGB today as something that we should think very carefully as a community as to how we want to develop that particular area. But I'm concerned about the livability of Bend, and if we don't do the kinds of things that we need to do to preserve the livability of our community, we're not going to have a community in the next 10 or 15 years that anybody is going to be really excited about coming to, either as a resident or as a tourist. And so I look at infrastructure, and I look over the years of being a disability rights advocate, I look at things that we used to call accessibility. And today we call sidewalks and curb ramps livability and mobility. And I think as realtors, you probably all appreciate, as I understand, that the average home person that's looking to purchase a home today is looking for livability and mobility. They're looking to live in a place where they can comfortably, like kind of Josh talks about, can walk to the grocery store, can walk to the bank, can walk to a restaurant, maybe go to their church or whatever. And the 300 miles of non-existent sidewalk that we have in our city, you can't do that. And so Bend is one of the lowest ranked cities for livability and walkability in the state of Oregon for populations of 50,000 and above. So I think that we need to build back the infrastructure that we have not built over the last 20 to 30 years. I think we need to look at the UGB, but I think we need to plan carefully and then decide how we want to move forward with it.
All right, thank you, Brian. Michael Hughes.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what's been said, and I think we hear a lot of good ideas coming from the candidates here, and I think that's a positive. I think when we look at the urban growth boundary, we need to look at our current urban growth boundary, the boundaries that we currently have, these that I look at pamphlet back there, and we definitely have some room to fill in that current urban growth boundary. I would be in favor of some high density, more high density, which would be potentially more affordable homes. At the same time, as we look to the next round of our urban growth expansion, I believe it's important to work with the county because we do have a lot of land east of the city that's in the county that we could potentially rely upon. And now some of that's EFU land, and I know that creates some problems. And I'm a firm believer in the right to farm and the right of farmers to farm. So I think when we do that, we need, if the county does, if we can get this done, we need to look at our urban growth boundary a little differently than Portland does. Often we're kind of put in the same box as Portland, and we're not the same town as Portland. We have some serious fire concerns here that we have to deal with. It's one of the big things I'm concerned about with, as a candidate, is our fire prepped a little differently. And I think if we can do that, we can have the type of high-density housing that does focus on livability and people being able to walk and bike to places where they shop and where they can eat, but then we can also have some buffers on the edge of the town where we don't have houses sitting around on top of each other. If there was a fire to break out, we might have a better chance to prevent it from spreading rapidly. So these are things I think we need to take into account as we grow and expand.
All right, thank you very much. Time for question number 2. And again, this is from Mr. Mosley. Oregon state law requires homeowners currently using a septic system and living within 300 feet of the city's sewer infrastructure to connect to the city's sewer system if their existing septic system fails. The completion of the city's southeast interceptor is one factor that has triggered the 300-foot rule for some Bend properties, leaving some homeowners potentially facing significant costs to connect to the city sewer. The city is currently working to develop a plan to assist homeowners financially who are required to connect, but to date no decision has been made. What do you think the city's responsibility is in addressing this issue, and what funding mechanism would you recommend?
Yeah, so this is complicated, and I think that, just to summarize it a little bit, the problem is that there's a state law or rule that says essentially that if you've got a sewer line going within 300 feet of your home, that when your septic system fails, you have to connect to the sewer, no matter how far you are. And the city policy is that you actually, as a homeowner, if you're 299 feet out, you've got to tear up the road all the way to the sewer, lay the sewer lateral to you, and then repave the road back out. So one homeowner said that was $180,000 when they got a quote. So you can imagine what a shock that would be. Now, we appointed a committee much too late to look at options, and if you equalize the cost among everyone in this area, it's $25,000 per home if you spread it evenly. What that really means, though, is if you break down on a monthly basis, it's $250 a month for 10 years for these folks that live in this area. And I've walked this entire area now talking to people, and they're just scared out of their wits. We've had several listening sessions. I've had people crying, people saying they can't sleep at night. We've been terribly unkind to the people in this area, the city has. The people living in it, most of them, or many of them, are actually older, living on fixed incomes, Social Security. Maybe they saved for their entire lives and they paid off their home, but now they live on $70 a month of discretionary income. And we're asking them to pay $250. And our study showed that if we charge them each $250, we'll actually throw about 200 people out of their house. It's just terribly unkind. We're Bendites. We take care of one another. We can spread those costs across the entire city. And it's not just those 600 lots. There's 2,400 lots across the entire city of Bend, all over the city, not just in the southeast, that need this help. We've always done that in our community, and I think we can still take care of one another.
All right, thank you, Bill. Sally?
So I agree with a lot of what Bill has already said, which is this is a big issue for these people on septic. And there is a state law that's enforced by the county. And the city of Bend, I've worked with several homeowners who have been sort of ahead of this curve in the past couple of years, trying to figure out better ways to move through this issue when the county says that their sewer is failing and they need to get on sewer because the sewer is now available 300 feet away. So here's what I think we need to do. We need to buy time from the Department of Environmental Quality. I've literally been we had public hearing sessions now for 3 times. We had 2 staff updates. We have a schedule for more data and more problem solving from our staff because honestly, we think some of these suggestions will not hold up in the courts. So what we do need to do is make sure we have the safety net program for those who qualify, for those people who are already earning or have $70 a month. We also need to share the cost between the city and the homeowner. This can come in a lot of different forms. I expect the ratepayers will pick up part of it. We're certainly looking for state and federal funding. It's a really big bill, and I'll get back to that in a moment. We need to look at financing options for these homeowners and find what these options are, because again, what the city of Bend is trying to do is find solutions to help move these homeowners through this problem as their septics are failing, because they are our city residents. I also want to make it really clear at this moment, we haven't said these homeowners will pay anything. At the end of the day, we're going to have to find a way to work together with them and agree on what the solution sets are going to be. If I got to be mayor for a day and have my way 100%, I would have the DEQ stand back and I would have neighborhoods one at a time make the decision whether or not they, as a group, wanted to save money to actually do it all together. But that's in the future.
All right, thank you, Sally. Joshua.
These issues aren't ones that come up in the photographer's life very often, so I'm giving a crash course in the education of big town issues. And I've been hearing a lot about this one actually, and I know people that live in the neighborhoods affected by this, and I have a number of questions only about it. We assign price to things more often than we assign a value to them. So is the cost of the project true cost? Is it, are people being accountable for the man hours spent and the equipment use, and can those numbers drop? If everybody is complaining about the price of a lawnmower, can my neighborhood buy one and everybody share it? Can all the local people that have the abilities to do these kinds of construction projects get together and donate some time and resources? Like, how can the cost change is one question I have. If that's not possible, then I am in total support of the community coming together to take care of this. I think it's unfortunate that state law or city law ends up getting blamed for these things, and then they want to make a limited number of citizens pay for the cost. It just doesn't, in my socialist mind, that doesn't make much sense. So I think there's a lot of creative ways to solve the problem, and I think moving forward we should be extremely careful as we make our promises to people who are living on a fixed income or who are buying a home. Maybe there's a potential to provide the money, the cost for the homeowners, and then that money comes back to wherever it comes from at the home sale. I don't know, I think there's a lot of different ways. I think there's a lot of, again, clever people in the community, and we could turn a lot of these issues into, let's hear from everyone that's going to be affected and come up with a plan that best suits everyone.
All right, thank you, Joshua. Mr. Brian Douglas.
The septic to sewer issue in Southeast Bend is not a new issue. It didn't just appear just recently. When the city decided they wanted to annex the southeast area, they knew that that area was on septic. They had to know, anybody that was on the planning commission in 1996, that that was going to be an issue that was going to burden this community at one point or another. I don't think the DEQ's mandate came any late. I think we've had it for 15 or 20 years. I'm not sure how long it's been, but it's not new. We knew it was coming. The city went out and convinced, obviously, if you want to call it that, for the annexation. They promised a number of different things, streets and sidewalks and curb ramps and street lighting. And if you talk to a lot of people out there, they say we've gotten very little. The city has taken the funds from the tax revenue from that area, and they have spent it in other places. And they did not set up any kind of a fund for the purposes of putting money aside to deal with a problem that they knew was coming. And now today, they want to put the burden on 2,600, is it, Bill? 2,600 pieces of property for a mistake that the city made. Again, no vision, no planning, no leadership, according to Mike Holler, for the last 20 to 30 years. And that's the reason why we have the problems that we have. And this problem is just one of them. There'll be more, I guarantee you, that we haven't figured out yet or seen, but they're coming. And so I believe we need 100% buy-in by every citizen in this community to help take care of the sewer issue in Bend, because the city council made the mistake. And now we, as a citizen group in entirety, have to correct that mistake. Not 2,600 property owners all by themselves. It's not the Bend way.
All right, thank you, Brian. Michael Hughes.
This is a problem that can be solved, and I think we've heard some of the solutions here, and that's why we have these discussions. I would suggest the city consider abating or waiving the fees associated with the hookup. Those are the things that are very, very expensive, and the city could waive those. Now, it's going to cost somebody to do it, but it comes back down to what Joshua said, which is we have to look and make sure that we're not wasting time and money on contractors, that everybody's getting stepped out on time, and the city should consider waiving and abating those fees. Another thing they can do is create a special assessment area that covers those homes, where they would abate or they would spread out the tax burden by not 10 years or 30 years. And then another thing we could do is consider having a city-wide pay a portion of it. So in other words, the homeowners affected pay a portion, but it's spread out over 30 years. The city itself pays a portion of it, 10%, 20%, whatever we create a consensus that everybody's comfortable with, and then we abate and waive the fees. I think this is something we could work towards solving this problem, and I don't think it's a big problem. I don't think it's as complicated as it's made out to be. I think we can find a solution to this and sooner rather than later.
Hold on, you get your 1 minute coming up here.
Good.
Okay, thank you, Michael. All right, question number 3. Back to Bill. Opposition from neighbors is not uncommon when affordable housing projects are proposed within the city. In the midst of an affordable housing crisis, how can Ben support neighborhoods while also increasing the supply of affordable housing?
I think this is about listening to people and neighborhood compatibility primarily. And it also has to do with the culture of the city. So too often, if you own a home, one of the nice things about owning a home is you have a sense of pride. You have a sense of pride in your home. You talk to your neighbors, you get to know these people, you maintain your lawn, you maintain the physical structures that you have. It's the American dream to actually own a home, and a dream that is still alive but fading and bent. When a neighbor is concerned about a 6-story apartment that lacks adequate parking being built next to them, they're not NIMBYs, as the city would call them. And I've heard staff say this in a derogatory way, saying, oh, these are just NIMBYs, they just don't want this kind of person next to them. And that's not it at all. They want a quiet neighborhood. They want a place to park their car, and they're accustomed to having a place to park their car for the last 25 years. And to take that away from them is a change, and that would upset any one of us. We need to listen to people instead, and stop using words like NIMBY to denigrate people that simply care and have pride in home ownership. There's nothing wrong with that. I've been successful on council so far in revitalizing the neighborhood associations. I've been a main proponent of it. I suggested a livability committee. Council had some hesitation. We ultimately came down, and I attended several meetings to form a neighborhood leadership alliance so that the neighborhood associations could actually get together and have a voice. I've encouraged us to actually listen to them at our goal setting. I'm the council's liaison to the River West Neighborhood Association as well as the Summit West Neighborhood Association. I've spent many, many hours actually working with those neighborhoods to give them a voice into the process. I've also suggested that we examine the notices that we give out to neighbors. So right now you can call down to the city planning office and they'll give you a 300-page packet of what their technical proposal is. Why not a simple 1-page summary like you have for a home loan that says, hey, here's a little picture of what's going here, here's a simple description, here's the parking and how we think it's going to affect transportation, so that the neighbors can actually understand what's going to be built next to them. A lot of times there's not a problem at all. People are just scared and afraid because they don't understand it, and we need to give them a chance to see what's actually happening.
All right, thank you. Sally?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Opposition from neighbors is not uncommon when affordable housing projects are proposed within the city. In the midst of an affordable housing crisis, how can Ben support neighborhoods while also increasing the supply of affordable housing?
So I'll start out by saying, in every neighborhood, we all love our neighborhoods and we love our neighbors. And there's a diversity of people who live in our neighborhoods with a diversity of needs. And I think one of the fallacies is like, who lives in affordable housing? You know, maybe it's the grandparents of the family that's raising their children. Maybe it's the secretary who lives on a really limited income and needs to live in a multifamily house, and a duplex will be next to there, and then her daughter, who just graduated from college and in her first job, is living next to her. Who are these people? And I think you also have the family who's hung on to the lot and all of it next to them, and all of a sudden they've said, hey, you know, it's time for me to build, you know, my dream home with an ADU so that my mother, who's old and aging, can actually live next to me and take care of her. In truth, we are actually doing a really good job right now. We've passed something like 32 different ordinances, changes to our code to allow affordable housing housing to be built more easily, which we've done density bonuses, we've done cottage codes. I can tell you up and down, backwards and forwards what we've done. We actually had 50 suggestions that we worked through in this room. We boiled it down to 12. We've passed about 8 right now. And we've actually stabilized rent and the cost of housing in this community. We know this is an issue all across the West Coast. We live in very desirable communities. We have people moving into this community that can pay more than the people who live in this community earn. Ben is working aggressively and hard to keep that as close as we possibly can, and we're making progress. And I have 5 more items that I want to move forward, including partnering with Parks and Rec on their SDCs, and I heard that I think they're very close to that decision. These are the types of solutions that we need to continue to implement.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Joshua?
I'm going to ask you to repeat it again.
Yes, of course. Opposition from neighbors is not uncommon when affordable housing projects are proposed within the city. In the midst of an affordable housing crisis, how can Ben support neighborhoods while also increasing the supply of affordable housing?
Okay, the first thing would be to find out if Ben wants to support this. There is so much wealth here. It shocks me. I've lived all over the world in many major cities across the United States. And, extreme examples, 30-story high-rises pop up in New York City, and I'm not sure how many of them went door to door to ask how the neighbors felt about it. People need a house to live. I've heard, to my face, people have suggested that if I cannot afford to live here, I should live somewhere else. That implies that you know so much about who you're speaking that to. What can I contribute to the community just because I don't share your value for pursuing an amount of money that affords me to live in a $700,000 house? These implications are extreme. At the last debate, someone said, well, we should just start shuttling people up from La Pine. Well, how does La Pine feel about that? Do they want to grow? And is that something that anyone would want to do, to travel 45 minutes each way to get to their $12 an hour job? And I'm not really sure about these things. So I think we need to suck it up and realize that growth is going to happen and choose the best way forward. Some people might have to sacrifice a parking spot. Some people might have to understand that they can get somewhere without driving. Some people might have to lose their view. People are going to have to make sacrifices for growth. It's inevitable. There is absolutely no way to grow the community in the way that it's supposed to grow. Half the amount of people here are going to be here again in the next 10 years. Sacrifices. That's what it's going to come down to. Compromising and being fair and ethical, dropping greed, and coming together. And that's my suggestion for moving forward.
All right, thank you, Joshua. Brian Douglas.
Affordable housing is, to me, and it's basically an oxymoron. Affordable housing, if you look at what's been done just recently, was a $180,000 home. I think it was 1,000 square foot, 5 homes being built in a little pod. That's the price of a house in 1990. It's nowhere near the price of a house at market value today. I look at this and say the first thing that we need to do when we talk about affordable housing is we need to raise the living wage in Bend from $15 an hour. That's the first place we need to start. You can't get a tenant lease at $11 an hour, and you sure can't buy a house on mortgage at $11 an hour. So I think that's one of the first thing that I would do as mayor is push for the $15 living wage. Josh took a shot at somebody who said last time we can shuttle people to La Pine. Well, I was the guy that was talking about that. And what I mean about that is we need to spread our wings out and look for where we can expand to, work with Deschutes County, for example, work with the city of La Pine, for example, and where there's affordable land that people can purchase, build a home, build equity, and be able to have a path to wealth at some level. Josh says they $12 an hour, 45-minute drive from La Pine. No. I'm saying light rail from Bend to La Pine and back in the next 10 years. and beyond. There's a lot of great ideas out there for affordable housing, but the current, I don't see that happening in Bend. And so I just think let's be grateful for what we have from Habitat for Humanity, but we're only building 1,000 units a year just recently, and we need 2,500 a year. And we're nowhere near that, and we're not going to be there anywhere near that in the near future.
All right, thank you, Brian. Michael?
Just to touch up on the last question too, I think another source of revenue for the problem in Southeast Bend and the sewer hookups is potentially some of the cannabis tax money too. It's a new revenue source, and I can guarantee you that the people in the cannabis industry would not object to that money being used to help out that part of the community. So that's another source of revenue. But on to this affordable housing crisis and how we can support neighborhoods who, as you mentioned, there is often opposition. But I think that those public notices are an important part of the process because that does allow neighbors to come and voice their complaints. That then allows developers to look at those complaints and say, is there a way we can mitigate this? And so part of it is we need that process where neighbors can come in and let the developers know and the city know what their concerns are. That's a huge part of the process, and that's how you can support the communities already there by letting them have their voice. And then the developers, it's on them to, when they come up with affordable housing projects, to present them and make them in such a way that they blend in with the rest of the community, that they don't have problems, that if there are problems, they can mitigate those problems. So then it becomes part of the developer's job to make sure they're able to present their project in a way that the surrounding neighbors are comfortable with. And then, as was said, part of the affordable housing crisis is attracting higher paying jobs to Bend. Bend is in the middle of an economic boom, but we can do better. We can bring more jobs in. There are other sectors of the economy that we can draw from and bring in higher paying jobs. And that is an important part of the affordable housing crisis, is to continue the economic growth that Bend has seen. And as mayor, that's one of the things I would like to really work on, is making sure we're continuing to attract good jobs, good companies that pay people a good living wage.
All right, thank you, Michael. We're on now to our final question of the afternoon, and we're going to start again with Bill. And this is a question that seems to come up in every debate. What differentiates you from your opponents, and what do you think is the most important distinction for voters to know?
I think that there's a number of policy disagreements. Certainly, how we view transportation, for instance. I don't believe you can change human behavior readily. I think that the government's job, and as a representative of the community, my job is to provide the kind of transportation modes that people actually demand and desire, which is primarily travel by personal vehicle, with also having neighborhood sidewalks and bike paths to get around safely. So I think that that's a key policy difference. I think there's leadership differences between us. I do contemplate things, and I'm very creative. I'll think about it, but I don't take forever to come to a conclusion. So you take an issue like septic to sewer, for instance, it's not really a hard decision to make. You can look at the people, and if you know Bend, and if you really know Bend, you know in your heart what the right thing to do is in that kind of situation. And we could blame it and say, well, there's technical challenges, there's legal challenges, blah, blah, blah. My goodness, we've studied it for years now. When would we ever make up our mind on something that is obviously the right thing to do? And that just speaks to the character of the person and your ability to actually make decisions, and difficult decisions. We're in a time of rapid growth within our community. We need to be thoughtful and listen to people, but we also need to move on and think ahead of where we're going. We can't just keep kicking the can down the road. The septic to sewer was a good example. When the last council awarded that contract, we knew 3 years in advance that we were going to cause this problem for these folks in Southeast Bend. That 3 years ago, we knew the date that sewer system was going to be turned on and when it was going to cause all this problem. And what did we do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We waited the whole 3-year time period, and then we formed a committee that took an additional 9 months. Meanwhile, people are hanging out there wondering what's going to happen to their home and where they're going to live. We need leadership that's stronger and more decisive than that.
All right, thank you, Bill. Sally?
It needs leadership that's strong and informed and positive and experienced. We need a solid transportation plan that takes us into the future. We need to support the collaborative public outreach and engagement that happened on this wall on affordable housing that's happening in our community around transportation planning. And we need the people who are running for mayor to support the modeling so that we know how it can play out and help and work for our community, not only in the next 10 years, but the next 50 years. We need leaders that know what it takes to actually put a plan in place that is visionary, that no one's done before, and sees how it plays out. So when I sat on planning commission, we watched the mill shut down, and we watched that mill that my grandfather had sold saw blades to get replaced by a plan for the new mill and the district, the old mill district. The new plan for the old mill district. You understand what planning can do to shape and form a community going forward. And not that we ever make a perfect plan, and not that we don't have to adapt and adjust, because as humans, as we make any plan in our family, we know that things change along the way. And I think adaptability and moving forward through that growth is really important. So I want to go backwards and say, again, let's protect what we came here for. We have a sense of community. We have a sense of neighborhood. We have a wonderful life here in Bend that many people are envious of and want to keep and want to move here for. We have a lot that's going really well in Bend. And we need a leader who recognizes not only what these problems are that we need to adjust, but how to take our community forward with good planning, making sure that we work together collaboratively.
All right, thank you, Sally. Joshua?
Could you repeat? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I will.
My number one goal is to make everybody laugh at some point today, so it's awfully stern. It feels really I'm different than the other candidates. Everybody knows this. I'm very much pro-growth, but with a bunch of caveats. I think we can choose our way forward. We have every example in all of history to look at and see how can we be deliberate about the way we're going to grow. Do we want to be continuing to build the kinds of properties that we've been building since the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, or do we want to rethink things? Do we want to continue to honor wealth accumulation and greed, or do we want to change things up? Do we want to bring in all the franchises and all the big box stores, or can we become inventive and bring in local businesses and new fresh ideas and bring more jobs to the economy that way? There's lots of questions. I also, this NIMBYism, this hating on tourism, these damn Californians, hope you can edit that out. You know, it's all, I'm just so tired of hearing about it, and I've not even been here 2 years. I think it's a very sad way to move forward, and I think we can make a lot better decisions than that. The word is out on Bend. We did a great job. We told everybody about it, and now we're reaping that benefit, if you want to look at it that way. And we can also stop doing that. We don't have to continue to tell the world about Bend, because everybody knows. I have an iPhone in my pocket, which is an incredibly good marketing tool. I'm a photographer, I'm a writer, I can say where I am at any moment of the day. I'm not much of a tweeter, but I can do that. I can use Facebook. I can look at all the online reviews for every single activity I ever hope to do and find out who's done it before me and what they think about it. So I don't know that we need to be spending millions of dollars a year telling people to come to Bend and then sit here and complain about tourists. So those are my differences. I really care about what everybody has to say. I'd like to find modern and progressive ways of gathering that information, and sharing it, revealing the process, and taking away transparency. Thank you.
All right, Joshua. Mr. Douglas.
Thank you. That's really a great question. And I want to say this. If you stop and think about the governance program that we've had in Bend for the last 90 years, And you ask yourself, well, how come we haven't solved some of these problems that you hear us talking about? How come we can't seem to work together and solve these problems? One of the big reasons is because we've had the type of government where we have 7 councilors, and then they get together after the election and say, okay, you're it. You're the mayor. And you over there, you're the pro tem mayor. And because nobody had to come up with a vision. Nobody was really the mayor. They were mayor in name only. But the chief job of the component of the mayor, of Ben, is to be the strategic visionary for the city. And now we're moving towards that. 73% of us said we want to directly elect the mayor. And we're going to do that here in 6 weeks. And that's absolutely terrific. It's a big start to what we need to do. But we need the mayor to have a vision of what we want to be in 25 or 50 years. And that's why I talk about governance. That's why I talk about let's catch up Ben with an infrastructure. I talk about the living wage. I talk about net zero energy programs. I talk about Cascadia Village, which is a planned homeless shelter program, which will be phenomenal once we get it put together. We talk about septic to sewer. You hear people say, well, we didn't even know that was coming until, 3 years ago, but I'm sorry, but that's not the case. The state set that up years ago and set their policies in place. And so I look at the fact that when 20 years ago, when we took over the southeast area and annexed it to the city, we just took the money and ran and spent it someplace else. Now the chickens have come home to roost, and it's $25,000 on 2,600 homeowners, and that's not fair. So that's the leadership that I talk about. That's how we need to, I differentiate myself from everybody else here at the table. All nice people, really nice.
All right, thank you. Michael Hughes.
You know, as I look around our country and our city, and sometimes you see just how divided we are, and people argue, and people get mad at each other, and people debate over who should be the president or who should be the president. With all that going on, I still find that most of us have way more in common than we do have differences. As Americans, as people who live in a community, we have a lot more in common. So I think I have a lot in common with each and every one of these persons. I mean, now, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that grows cannabis, so maybe that might be a differentiation between me and the other candidates. So, but other than that, I think we all love Ben. I think we all want the best for what's Ben. And I mean, the thing that makes me a little different is that I'm not a partisan. I don't have any ties to either political party. I don't have political friends. I'm very independent-minded. I'm just as where I grew up. My mom was a Republican, and her parents were Republicans. My dad's a Democrat. His parents are Democrats. So I heard it all at the table. Made me a very independent thinker. Made me able to listen to both sides of an issue, and made me able to analyze things in a way that I can empathize and understand other people's points of view. And then, from my perspective, I'm a problem solver. That's what I do in my practice. I solve problems. People come to me with problems, and I try to find out ways to resolve them. Unlike the government, we don't have all day to do it. We've got to get her done now. So I believe in analyzing the situation as carefully as you can, bringing in everybody that has something to say about it or has something to add to the issue, and then coming to a consensus and making a decision. So I'm about getting stuff done. So that I don't know. I think all these people like to get stuff done too. So the good news is Ben has a bunch of candidates that are looking to move this town forward. So I think that's the good news for everybody.
All right, thank you, Michael. All right, now comes that golden minute that we spoke of earlier, where candidates will get a chance to, I suppose, rebut what has been said. There's a lot to go over there, and surmising an argument in 1 minute may be difficult, but we'll see how concise you can put your thoughts together on this. And Bill, we'll begin with you. You have 1 minute.
Okay, I want to go back and revisit our approach to affordable housing. It is true that the city of Bend has taken on a number of measures, 30-some, to try to tinker with the marketplace, but by far the most effective thing we can do to provide affordable housing for our community is let the market do it itself. The city doesn't need to provide extra regulations, rules, all these kinds of things. The city needs to get out of the way. So when we place inordinate burdens on particular properties, we actually just make it more and more expensive. In my council's last term, I asked for the first time when we were adopting development codes, I said, well, what's the financial impact of making that development code change? That reinforced concrete you went up around a fire hydrant, and staff had really never considered how much it costs to the average home. It turns out in that case it was $6,000 per home to adopt that regulation. We don't really have a mentality of considering those kinds of things, and so probably one of the best things we can do is to get out of the way, allow that input into the process so we can consider applications on other people.
All right, thank you, Bill. Sally?
You know, I think it's really important when you are choosing a leader and a mayor for Ben to understand it, to look at it a couple different ways. One is a person needs to understand sort of what's legal and what's not legal. So on the transient room tax, we actually are required by law to spend $3 million a year. It's a lot of money, and it's embedded in state law. And $6 million of that goes into the general fund, and that's what primarily goes to police and fire. And there's actually more dollars that come per room than come per capita to support police and fire. So our safety funding comes from, a lot of it comes from the transient room tax. We need to understand that. We need to understand that tourism is 20% of our economy. We need to understand that tourism creates resiliency in downturns. We need to understand that it brings and provides access to restaurants, to stores. It brings a lot of people, but it also contributes in many ways to jobs and this town.
Okay, thank you, Sal. Joshua?
I think the job description for mayor is quite funny given all of this. It's basically non-existent. The difference between the mayor and the city council members is that you hit a gavel every once in a while and you run a meeting in a formal way. And as of November, I guess you get $500 more per month for a total of $1,000 per month. So I've never applied for a job in any capacity that pays so little that has this involved. And I think the city seems to think that the mayor is supposed to do all kinds of magical things, and that the councilor are supposed to do all kinds of magical things. But I actually like to be much more vocal about saying that that's not true, and you are why we are here. It's your voice that we are supposed to represent. This is a democracy. This isn't a bunch of authoritarians up here proclaiming our dictations and setting the town that we want it to be. It's your town, and you are supposed to give us information that we are supposed to condense and consolidate and build a better plan forward with. So let's think about that.
All right, thank you, Joshua. Brian Douglas?
I want to go back to a couple of things. First of all, I think that we need to change the governance patterns that we have here in Bend. We started to do that in the May election with electing our mayor directly. I think we need to shrink the number of council members down to 4, put them in districts, north, south, east, and west. And we're going to increase the opportunity for them to get familiar with the people they represent in that particular area. And the citizens will know who they can go to talk about city issues. The trust level here is extremely poor. It's poor in many places, but over the last 20 to 30 years, we've exacerbated it in Bend, and we need to fix that in the first wave of fixes, which I plan to do as mayor. I look at all the different programs that are out there, and I just think that we are moving in the right direction. We have a great community, there's no doubt about it. But we need to have a vision and a plan, and we need to communicate that to the public and get their support and their buy-in. And I think then we'll be a great city.
All right, thank you, Brian. Michael Hughes?
As I said, I think the mayor, as opposed to a council person who represents a particular district, the mayor represents the entire town. And as I mentioned, this town's eclectic. I think if you look at the statistics, it's like a third Democrat, a third Republican, a third Independent. I mean, it's literally that kind of breakdown that the city has. So that's why I think the mayor that the people of Bend elect needs to be somebody who can work with all those groups of people. Because if we can't work with the different groups of people and the different ideas, we may never get anything done. We may need to spin our tires off. So I believe that I have the ability to listen to everybody, to bring their ideas to the table, to articulate their ideas. And I think the mayor has to be able to do that. They have to be able to articulate other people's ideas because it's important as a community that all our voices be heard. And it's also important for all the other council members to hear those voices and to be able to listen to those voices as they make their deliberations about how they're going to move forward as a community. So that is what I think is the most important part of being mayor. And I think everybody on this panel could successfully do that.
Move on to that. Okay, well, those are our 4 questions. Now it's time, your opportunity to ask some questions. And again, we'll keep the same format, 2 minutes per answer from the audience questions. But we can share the mic so all of you would get to have 2 minutes on these questions. There will be no rebuttal on this, by the way. Here's question number 1.
This is for Bill. Bill, you look good, you sound good, but I didn't hear a lot of answers in your answers. And in a review of the city council meeting minutes over the last few years, the duration of your term so far, you voted with the council on the subject of sewer plans. You voted with the affordable housing recommendations, and you are proposing to cut back on tourism funding, which is state mandated, which you really can't do anything about. So could I have some more definite answers in your answers with regard to subject to sewer and affordable housing?
Yeah, I think I've been pretty specific on subject to sewer. I specifically would spread the fee across all households in the city of Benton. I would let people connect from their house to the sewer line when they needed it instead of forcing everybody to connect at the same time. On tourism specifically, there's an old wives' tale essentially around that talks about we have to use the funding for tourism advertising. And that's just flat out not true. I am actually an attorney, and if you look at the Oregon Revised Statute 320.30, it gives you 3 different types of activities that you can do defined in it. You can build a tourism advertising is one of them, but you can also do a tourism-related facility, including a conference center that's approved by the International Association of Conference Centers. So this is an example of one. We could actually be using tourism funds instead to build a performing arts center, instead of drawing people with ever-increasing amounts of home equity into our community and displacing existing residents. So those are specific things. I've also been really specific on transportation proposals. When my fellow councilor voted against Murphy and Empire, I wanted those roads connected. I wanted Empire to go to 27th about the market. I wanted Murphy with an overpass over the train crossing. That's specific. I want Purcell connected. I supported specifically the road maintenance funds and got us to have record contracts related to road maintenance. So I think I've actually been quite specific. I was specific when I created a livability committee. I was specific when I referred a neighborhood transportation fund to that livability committee. I was specific when I asked them to review our land use policies, and when I proposed that we gradually move our economy away from a tourism-based economy because it creates low-wage jobs that don't support the housing costs we have. I was specific when I asked council to set a goal for housing. I said I wanted a housing goal that didn't include just the poorest of the poor, but gave goals for the council to provide middle-class housing as well. You know, I have a record of being very specific and successful on this council.
Next question?
Mr. Mosley, thank you very much for your time on the council, as well as Sally. I think that it is, as was I think pointed out by Josh, not a very highly paid position, but one that demands a ton of time. First of all, I want to clarify something that I think you said. Do I understand you correctly that you would let the marketplace take care of affordable housing?
I think that the cheapest, most effective way we can have affordable housing in our community is to have enough of it, to balance supply and demand in particular. And so we need to bend that demand curve down, which is being driven by tourism advertising right now. We advertise in some of the most expensive magazines in these most expensive coastal cities. in the United States, and we brought people in with enormous amounts of housing appreciation. They come and they visit here, and they say, oh, what a beautiful place. And it is a beautiful place, there's nothing wrong with that, but they're displacing the people that already live here, and they're causing their housing prices to rise. As far as like using the market, we primarily need to get out of the way and allow supply and demand work. In our case, we're not adding any supply to the market at all, and that's why prices continue to rise. We adopted the UGB after a 7-year battle, and we still have not brought in an inch of square dirt. We have an 18-month supply of buildable land in our community, and if we continue to build at the rate we are right now, we won't have a single lot left in our city to be built upon. We are going to have a tremendous housing crisis, and you know, we actually need to build housing on the east side of town where it could be affordable. And it's no surprise, and I don't think people in Bend should be surprised, that the first development to come in isn't going to be affordable housing over on the east side. The first development is actually over on the west side near Northwest Crossing. And they're going to build some nice $700,000 or $800,000 homes in that area, and that will be the first place. Instead of the area we could have built out, for the people in the southeast part of the city, we sent them to a 2-year-long committee to go study the issue forever, like we did septic to sewer, and we know how that turned out.
Excuse me, but when you look at where, I feel a little bit like you're contradicting yourself when you say things like the septic to sewer, that we need to share that cost, but then you're going to let the developers go in and develop affordable housing. If you speak to any of the developers in town, big or small, they've got problems with SDCs and land acquisition costs. And you combine those, and if you combine all of those costs, getting an affordable housing without any assistance from city or state laws or county laws is not going to happen, period.
On the city issues, the SDCs, I did suggest that we raise it. I do think that buildings should pay for itself. I think that it should pay for the cost of the transportation sewer. And when I went to the builders, they were like, really? Are we going to have to pay 100% of those costs? And I said, yeah, we don't have any other magic source of money. And so the choice for us is to either say, well, we can have these SDCs, or we could not build the housing, because the money has to come from someplace. We have a $450 million backlog of sewer and road infrastructure projects in our city. How did that backlog develop? It developed because previous councils only charged 50% of the allowed rate for our sewer and transportation projects, and so we just kept building up and building up and building up, and now we have a giant problem, just like septic to sewer. I do think that the SDCs are a component of the overall problem, and until we have another source, I'm not sure what else we can do. I think if we don't actually build, that that prices will rise much faster than the SDCs are going to rise. And then as far as like getting out of the way, the staff and the council previously just didn't consider the ramifications of not building. If we don't build, then what happens to our costs? If we allow development charges or development standard to rise and change in certain ways, then how much does that actually cost and add to the cost of housing? The land costs are partially driven by we just don't have any land at all. It's on paper someplace, so they just can't actually build on it. Until there's available land and a supply of it, prices for land are going to be very expensive.
All right, I'm going to interject here just a second. If we could, I'd like to hear from some of these other candidates. I know Mr. Mosley is very popular here to ask questions of, but I'd like to hear also from some of the other candidates and let them have a chance at this. So, sir, if you could direct a question at maybe one of the other candidates, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, my question is on all the candidates. I've been following city council for years and years, and I've watched mistakes be made, and I've watched progress be made. And Bend is a beautiful place, there's no question about that. So, the bottom line is that we're not controlled locally. We're controlled by the state. How do you expect to change that? Who's going to go and fight with the state and say, this is not a one-size-fits-all? We don't want to be like Northeast Portland. I don't want to live in a 6-story of an apartment building. I came here to live on some land on a lot and look at the mountains. And that's why I'm here. And I ski and I do all those things. But I don't want to be controlled by LCDC, which says you have to do this, you have to do this. Who's going to stand up to them up there?
Good question. Yeah.
That's fair, my cousin.
Yes, exactly.
All right, interesting question. You want to get started, Josh? Go ahead.
Sure.
I think we have to come to terms with you may or may not be part of the majority, but it's about finding out who that is. So who is Ben? Is Ben you?
Yeah.
It might be,
Yeah.
but Ben is also me, and Ben is also people that ended up here and came here yesterday. So I don't think that one has more privileges because they were here longer. It's just not the American system. It doesn't, like, we've proved that wrong. As soon as we got off the boat and committed genocide, we basically decided our future. So I don't know that we have an adequate way of hearing from the citizens. I think we can modernize that. I think we can develop an app, for example, and load up every major issue in town and just start hearing from the entire population about these things. And then, yeah, take the consensus to the city. It's not, our job is to be a representative. So hear from everyone and bring that information forward. But I think anybody would be willing to go to bat for the consensus.
I'm a native Oregonian, sir, and I want to tell you, when you bring up the issue about LCDC, when all that was put together here in Oregon made a decision, and they looked at California, and we looked at Washington, and we said to ourselves, we want to work on issues that are going to keep our livability at high levels. And so we passed the LCDC program, and we passed the beaches to be open to everybody, and we passed the recycling programs and all of those things that have made Oregon what it is today. And Oregon is benefiting today from those forward-thinking folks. One was a hog farmer from Hermiston, and he came up with the LCDC, Land Use Development Program, and it's serving us extremely well. But I do want to say that when you ask who's going to go to Salem and fight for people that live in Central Oregon, well, we have a state legislature. We have legislators, right? I know we don't have a full complement of them right now, but maybe after November 6th, we will. And when Sally made a mention of something, when she said, well, the law says TRT has to do this and this and this, and then Bill says over here, and he says, well, yeah, we need to build a convention center. There's already a bill in the legislature right now to change the funding formula for TRT. And we need to have our legislature people, our representatives in Salem, pointing that out and trying to make a change in that. And if we need to make changes on LCDC types of things, we need representatives to go to Salem and do that for us. And the mayor, because we're the largest city on the east side of the mountains, is going to have an influence on all of that. And I realize you don't want to live in a 6-story building, neither do I. You want to look at the mountains and you want to ski and you do all that. Well, you should be thankful. Because 30 years ago, some really forward people, thinking Oregonians, have made what we have available today. And it's not bad. It's not California, that's for damn sure.
All right. Thank you, Brian. You want to chime in on that, Sally? You want to go? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, so, part of this afternoon, we've been talking about how expensive it is to build streets and to build sewer. So I'm the subject to sewer and their transportation funding. And so in truth, whether or not it's a land use or not, we need to recognize that up and down the West Coast, we have really attractive cities, and we need to understand that affordable housing is partially an issue because of the cost that it simply takes to pay for the infrastructure to get to the homes. So when I got onto council, actually the state had turned down the first application to the state, and I was a huge advocate of pulling in a really robust public outreach program, which we did through technical advisory committees. And by the time we got to the final plan, we understood that we actually had a plan that the whole community supported in that moment, that we brought in some, but probably not all the land that people would have wished. We recognized that we had a fair amount of property within the city that we still had to develop, and we do have some landowners inside the UGB with some really significant land holdings. So I expect Harna and I will work together and try to figure out how to work with that property owner so that family understands how to develop this relatively large section of land. So a couple of things. The convention center, although it's allowed in the state law, we are gonna have to change our local code, and that's, I checked into that today, so I won't drop in, but that's more difficult than it sounds on the surface. I tend to know that we need a convention center, but remember, we actually have a convention center in Redmond and here in Bend, and then the downturn, we had to put taxpayer dollars into supporting the center down in Redmond, so it's not always as good as it looks. I'm going to keep going for a moment because I have a little rebuttal here that I would like to do. First of all, I want to say Visit Bend only markets within 8 hours of Bend, so that's not very far away. I also want to say that the building lands inventory is only lands within Bend that actually has infrastructure available to it. So we actually have a lot of lands within Bend that don't have the infrastructure to them yet, so that's not in the BLI. And one of my priorities is actually to update what we call the BLI, the Buildable Lands Inventory. So I'm a fan of that. The last thing I want to say is I have a copy of my voting record here on Murphy and Empire.
Well,
So I'd like to clear this up.
Sally, I apologize to you, but we're gonna have to cut you off because that's
Councilor
just fair.
Mosley and I have voted.
Would you please pass the microphone down to Mr. Hughes?
I think the question was, who's going to fight for Ben in Salem?
Thank you.
Now, I remember being a 6-year-old boy standing in the field with a corn knife, knocking weeds out of the beans before they developed Roundup Ready soybeans. And my grandparents, whose family had farmed hemp since the 1800s, told me why the hemp growing on the fence rows was not allowed to be farmed anymore. And as a 6-year-old, that struck me in a very wrong way. And probably from about 1980 on, I dedicated my life to changing the cannabis laws. And I fought hard. I fought the courtroom, I fought this county, I fought the state. Also as a litigator, I fought in Dow Chemical, Monsanto, International Paper, Burlington Northern on a toxic tort case where they went up and polluted an entire Indian reservation town with dioxins and were killing people. I've spent my life fighting. If you're looking for somebody to fight, to go stand up for Ben, to make noise in Salem when we have to make noise, I'm your person.
All right. Well, I guess you didn't get the mic on this one, did you? Okay, let's give Bill 2 minutes, and then after that, we're gonna go to closing remarks, okay? We gotta keep this on time.
Yeah, I won't take the whole 2 minutes. I actually have experience related to this DCLD item and local control. I served on the Transportation Planning Advisory Committee for the DCLD as Ben's representative. And they had 2 specific proposals. One of them that I successfully got them to take back. One was that they wanted us to study how much parking we actually needed for land uses, so for apartments, restaurants, whatever. And then they wanted us to provide 10% less than that. I know that doesn't make any sense. It didn't make sense to me. I successfully got them to strip that out. And then the other one was, they wanted to make it so that the proposed rule said that on our transportation system plan, which designs our plan for the next 25 years or so for Bend, they wanted us to submit that to the DCLD, and the original rules would have allowed their director actually to replace any item he wanted in our plan and to take it back to the commission and get it approved without our input. And I don't think that it's up to the state to actually independently modify the way that Bend people get around. It's not right. And I successfully fought against that too, worked with the Bulletin to get editorials against this particular item. So I have actual practical success in pushing back on the DCLD.
All right, thank you, Bill. Okay, we got to cut off the questions from the audience now. We're running really long today, and some of us have to get to our $12 an hour jobs. Okay? We're going to solve them. Okay, 2-minute closing remarks, and again, Bill gets to start with us.
Yeah, it'll be less than 2 minutes. And it's actually not our $12 an hour jobs. If you're a city councilor, you make $200 a month. And I measured over my service, it's been about 17 hours a week actually working for Bend residents. It's quite a labor of love, and I've got 4 kids. Only 1 out of the house, 3 are in the house. and a software company that is more than a full-time job. So it's really a passion of mine to serve the people of Bend. It would be a great honor to serve as your mayor. I would do the very best I could to actually manage our growth. And what managed growth means to me is that we have an actionable plan for our future and then we execute. We deserve a city government that's focused on getting things done on the critical issues that are before us. Housing costs that people of all income ranges can afford. Properly maintained roads with adequate road capacity. Neighborhoods that are quiet, safe, and friendly. I've shown over the last 2 years that I've actually gotten quite a bit done on this council, and the playing it nice above common sense game has got to stop if we're going to get ahead of the growth that we have in Bend.
All right, thank you. Sally?
The question to ask yourselves is this. Who is sitting in this group of people today has the best set of skills to lead our city forward? Who is going to be able to work not only with the other 6 councilors and find consensus and work with them collaboratively so that all voices are heard from throughout the entire community, all 90,000 or more of our residents? Who is that person going to be? Is it going to be someone who's collaborative? Is it going to be someone who's experienced? Is it going to be somebody who's informed? Is it going to be somebody who's strong? Who is it who's got the track record and the experience and the relationships, who believes listening to opinions, who believes engaging in your community, who will stay positive and optimistic, never divisive? I will work hard to keep Bend beautiful and livable. I am committed to this city. You're right, we're only paid $200 a month, but that doesn't matter because I pledge to work full-time to make sure that we take this city into the future in the way that we've enjoyed it, whether or not we came here in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, or yesterday, because we all deserve it, and that's the town we want to keep. Thank you.
All right, Sally, thank you. Joshua, come on.
I definitely have a track record of listening, and that's my entire motivation for being here today. I think it's very easy to get caught up in the woes of growth and the woes of not making enough money and not being able to afford your rent and your broken down car. And I'm familiar with all of these things. That's the world that I live in. And as I came to Bend, I thought that it was at the right size where, as we grew, I could probably have an opportunity to leave my dent here and to contribute to the positive growth of the community. And I've been weighing that option since I've been here. And I'm wondering if it's going to swallow up the people here that really are going to care the most. I think the amount of money in your bank doesn't equate to the amount of care that you have for a place. And it's going to be very easy to lose entire populations of people here. So I believe very much in listening, gathering people together in a public setting much more often than we do. I think we should have room for more than 40 people at city council meetings and perhaps bring back the town hall and engage the citizens. I think we should develop modern forms of communicating. There's a lot of people that are in that world here in this town, and I don't think that would take tons of resources to engage the public on a regular basis. And then represent. That's what we're supposed to do. Every councilor and the mayor, it's what their goal is to represent the community in which they live and to help guide it in a good direction. So that's where I'm at. That's where my head's at. And I look forward to meeting many more of you than I already have. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
All right, thank you. Mr. Becker?
I have tried for the last, since 1990, as I've been a community rights or disability rights advocate, to work across the board with citizens and their issues and with the city government and the department heads and everyone, city councils over that period of time. So I get a little queasy when somebody starts to talk about divisiveness, because what's divisive to some people is advocacy to others. And I think there's a major difference if you're talking truth to power, and that's very, very important. I think we need to, as I've said before, I think we need to improve our governance model. I think we need to put our councilors into districts. I think we need to have them accountable to those districts and to the residents who live there. I think we can improve the amount of participation in our city by doing that. I think we can build trust back with our residents. because they have somebody that was right there in their neighborhood, that they shop with, they go to church with, they go to the movies with, and they can talk to them about problems that they have. I just see that as one of the basic building blocks that we need to establish. I've tried to lay out for everybody that I can the infrastructure issues that I see and what we need to be doing. We've left a lot of people behind already. We have a major problem with people in the septic, the sewer and the septic problem. We're going to lose a lot of those folks with concerns, and I think that we need to address those issues. I think we need a living wage of $15 an hour. It makes me sick to think that Lee Anderson has to leave here now and go back to his $12 an hour job. I think we need net zero energy programs for solar in this community. It would save money for the city, it would save money for our residents, it would make us off the grid, it would make us self-sufficient, it would be just tremendous. And I think we need a really good program for taking care of our homeless problem, and we didn't really talk much about that, but you can go to my website and see it.
All right, thank you, Brian. Very good. And Mr. Michael Hughes.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Central Oregon Association of Realtors for putting this forum on. I'd like to thank Mr. Anderson for moderating it. I'd like to thank all of you for showing up and participating in these great community events. This is what makes our country great, right here. Now, I believe in a few things that I think are important to Bend. And I think they're important because they're already values that we already have as a community. And these are kind of the foundations of my candidacy. And I believe if we be kind, if we be safe, if we be smart, we can be better. And what do I mean by that? Be kind. Just mentioned a huge problem. I went to Portland not too long ago, and it was heartbreaking being in downtown Portland. I think we as a community need to address the homelessness issue, and we can serve as an example to other communities on how to deal with it. So I think that's our obligation as a community to be kind and figure out an answer to that solution. I also think we need to preserve the small town community that we have. This is a kind community. People wave, people say hi, people talk to each other. We need to preserve that. We need to preserve that kindness that makes this community. We also need to be safe. We have to look at fire preparedness. We have to look at ways to prevent fires. We have to look at our current city fireworks policy. There's things we have to do to prevent a tragedy like happened in Reading. And we as a community can do that. We need to make sure that our first responders have everything they need to be prepared and to respond if we have that emergency. And that's part of being safe. Bend is a safe community. That's why a lot of us like to live here, because it's safe, unlike a lot of other communities. It is a safe community, and we need to preserve that safeness. We need to spend more money and train more police officers to be drug recognition evaluators so that we can deal with the opioid epidemic and the legalizing of cannabis and deal with those sort of issues. If we do these things, if we can be safe, be smart, and be kind, we can continue to be Bend.